Welcome to FutureProofed. Conversations and insights with Europe's top data and AI leaders, designed to help you navigate what's next. Today, as generative AI shakes up industries, its ripple effects are reaching the job market. Companies are rethinking their talent strategies, and entry-level job seekers are re-evaluating their skills, education choices, and long-term career paths. Uncertainty about how to grow a career in the age of AI is rising. I'm Sara, and I'm here today with Roozbeh, an entrepreneur and founder of Bandpey, a German boutique data and AI company, and Dave, an engineering manager that spent the last 15 years working in big tech. Dave and Roozbeh are ex-colleagues. Dave, welcome to FutureProofed. And Roozbeh, welcome to you too. Before we dive into your personal stories, let's zoom out for a second. What is the biggest shift you're seeing in the job market right now as AI adoption picks up pace?
Please. Do you want me to start? Sure. So, I see a lot of interesting things. We were talking about this just before we started recording, right? That I was looking at some European Commission data yesterday night that said, yeah, technically unemployment is a little up and job vacancies are a little down, but they're not unusual, right? They're not like extremely high or extremely low. It doesn't look like the pandemic or anything like this, but it does kind of make you wonder whether or not people are pulling back on some of their job descriptions and their job postings today because they're not sure what should be in them or they're not sure what role should be there. But it's really tough for me to say that. As a hiring manager, I definitely don't see something concrete that's different, right? I still see applicants. I still see, huge numbers of CVs for any given open role that I've got. So there's not something unusual that jumps out at me already.
In my perspective, there are some changes that we are not really used to see like before, but the demand is still there and the supply might have changed a little bit. There's some fluctuation in the supply into the talent market in general. But if I want to look at the past 2 decades, specifically in European market, primary change that I see is that in the past 15 to 20 years ago, the European job market was primarily characterized by security, safety, the metaphorical career ladder that, you get a degree from the college, you start working and you climb this career ladder, and then the company in return is providing some sort of safety for you. This, in my opinion, has changed a little bit, specifically with, post Web 2 era, with availability of the data, with AI technologies. These kind of jobs in domain of AI that are getting created, it's offering a little bit more, autonomy, more fulfillment for specifically new generations. And we see people who are willing to take the risk and potentially make, so to say, lateral movements and enter this. So we have seen a lot of, people from physics background and material science background who are willing to enter these fields as well.
That's very interesting. Can you break down the macro signals for us? Things like investment flows, hiring freezes, and those red-hot hiring pockets that seem to defy the slowdown.
Absolutely. Well, there are changes happening in the market, and there's this post-pandemic era of overhiring, and then potentially the corrections that the big techs applied afterward by some layoffs and so on, and then comes the post Gen AI era that some of them start potentially get rid of some roles that they had. That it's still speculated that is this really related to AI? Is it really AI doing this kind of work that I don't potentially need this new stuff anymore? But what we are seeing is that, still investment is flowing, still startups are raising capital, they are hiring. So it's a bit strange, as I mentioned earlier. It's not a change that we are used to see like before. It's like this weird duality that, the top of the market is freezing, especially in automotive sector in Germany, in OEM. There has been roughly 80,000 layoffs in the past 5 years. And so the top of the market is freezing, rather, the bottom and the middle of the market is heating up. There's a lot of hiring happening there. They need quick access to the talent to move to get a product out there, and that's creating the demand. But again, the question is that are those talents that are getting injected back to the market, are they willing to take a pay cut to go into a fast-moving environment, put various different hats? That's basically a question, concerns that we see mostly in the market.
What do you think, Dave?
I mean, I see mostly what is going on for big SaaS companies. So this is where I work, and the type of things that I see people hiring for are, I hate to say traditional, but we're making software products already, and so we already have a very good idea of what we should be hiring for and the type of profiles that we're looking for. And again, generative AI and the rapid rise of AI coding tools, for example, it definitely makes people stop and think about what skills I want to evaluate. I see a lot of posts on LinkedIn and the like, people talk about, oh yeah, we did this kind of a job interview this week and we didn't use any of these traditional tools for the job interview. And I think, yeah, that's great if people can manage it. But for the most part, I think a lot of big firms are just moving they're just moving the money around to the places where they think there's growth. And big software companies already know where they're investing, and they're just going to hire engineers, and they might update some job specifications, but they're probably not radically changing them. I mean, I definitely don't see it. So in the startup space where people are a little more freewheeling, they maybe have more flexibility than that.
The plan for big tech and big SaaS companies is pretty much clear. I think this, so to say, these changes are very sector dependent, and also it depends at what maturity level the company is. For instance, a company that Dave works, it requires completely different setup than potentially who is in startup phase and want to do potentially different things.
Perfect. That leads me right to my next question. So you both speak with a lot of candidates, and from their side of the table, how do these macro signals translate into what people are actually experiencing on the job hunt?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for my case, what I see a lot of lately that I hadn't seen in past years was a lot of people pulling back at the last minute and saying, like, I have a counter offer. And for, I'd say, the last few years, I kind of enjoyed this, that like if we were making job offers, people were accepting them. And that was that. But lately, I do hear a little bit more of, oh, well, I have somebody else that's offering me this much. And I think, my first impulse, of course, is, oh, that's interesting. I don't normally hear it. So I definitely see something that I haven't seen in the past years occurring in the job market in this sense. But I mean, obviously, I'm not one of those job seekers, so I don't really know what they're thinking. I don't know if it's a game. I don't know if it's a negotiating tool, but I definitely am hearing it more. And if I'm hearing it, it's because people feel more confident asking for more or demanding more in some cases. So this is one thing I'm definitely seeing on the ground. But I mean, that might also be unique because, well, you probably see something very similar, because I feel like I'm also hiring in unique areas. I'm usually looking for machine learning engineers and experienced software developers. So this could be this is always a market that's a little less soft than like an entry level market, or for more general application development roles. But it's hard to tell which parts are directly related to the overall market.
Yeah, totally. Do you think that's the reason that candidates are asking for more and offering counteroffers, because that they do they have the background from big tech mostly?
No, I mean that's a part of the curiosity for me, is that I see these asks sometimes from people that that don't seem to have a compelling background that really makes them stand out.
Right.
And so it makes me think that they're just being offered more by a company who just wants it more. But
interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, I have totally similar observation. I mean, we had various different interviews in the past 6 months to 1 year. And we have seen, quite different, so to say, volatility in terms of, what people really want. Some of them are so to say, willing to, just at whatever sake enter their first, potential step in their career. And some of them are asking for, some unusual amount. I would say that I have the similar observation as well.
Well, they all read about, big, OpenAI coming to Munich and offering people $500,000, per year compensation packages. And so people start thinking, oh, maybe everybody should be getting 300, 400,000.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, I like this example of recently I saw on LinkedIn that, the AI job market and AI space is becoming like football. You have these various different leagues, and then the top league is paying 100 millions and to specific talents, and then you got this, third leagues and so on. That's potentially a lower offer. And
Well, I mean, there's always this concept of the market that you're operating in, right? And people aren't used to thinking about this, but if you're a job seeker and you're talking to a small local firm, you are probably going to get a local economy based salary. So something that's in a very small pool. And if you're talking to a giant global firm and they're going to take your product, your output, and turn it into a global product with global scale, you're going to be in a bigger league. And yeah, the compensation packages are going to be bigger. And of course, if you go to the biggest of the big, then everything gets bigger with it. But I think everybody is fully aware, though, that the demands are quite high at those points. If somebody's offering you twice as much money as you were making before, it's probably not because they're expecting you to do exactly the same thing that you've been doing. They're probably expecting more than double of the output from you. So don't forget that if you're if you're talking to somebody, if they offer you a seemingly large amount of money, then they probably have a very high bar and you will need to meet it.
That's true. It's just different kind of a sentiment that I get from not candidates though, from friends, from the people that I know who are active in the domain of data and AI, is that some of them, this is like recurring pattern that I see from some friends, is that they raise frustration that they cannot catch up with the technologies. Just too many stuff are popping off. And they don't know if it's something is going to stay or if it's something worth learning or not. Some of them, they even raise concern that, what, I'm not going to do AI anymore. I'm just going to move toward, foundational stuff, heavy liftings, because there's more stability there. Have you had that impression?
If there are certain skills that everybody needs to have. And I see this today where people apply for roles and they appear to have a lot of skills and then they seem to be missing some foundational ones. And those are the things that we rely on from day to day, though. So there is a lot of, there is safety in having these, very strong foundational skill sets. These are also things that, that are harder to educate somebody on. You can't just put somebody through a course for 3 months and then afterwards they're going to behave like somebody who's been doing something for 10 years.
Exactly.
It doesn't work this way. So having these, really stable profiles where they know that they can do the bread and butter work or the unsexy things, as I like to say, that they are, they can deliver the unsexy things very reliably. This is extremely valuable, for the other percentage of your time that you spend working on something that's super sexy. Those are some things that are easier to teach someone.
That's super interesting points. I also feel, maybe you can tell me about that people feel more confident now when they're applying because they know that they can use ChatGPT to ask anything, like also, for example, like how high should the salary be and so on. And I think also they get ideas through AI, how much they can ask for and what they can do. And they feel like they can learn the skills easier because of AI. What do you think about that? Is that also the feedback that you're getting from candidates, that they're more confident now because of those tools they have?
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely met a lot of experts of 2 years in the last 12 months. So, and I don't mean to to mock somebody's work experience or their proficiencies, but there is a big difference between really knowing something and and then having completed it or having done it once.
Exactly.
And so completing a bunch of labs is one thing, but I really want to know how deeply you understand something. Can you adapt this into a real life scenario? What if it's not just modifying the kit that you downloaded from the LangChain website?
Exactly. Spot on. Completely agree with you. I've also had a lot of interviews that it's just, after 10 minutes of interview, it gets more and more unearthed that that the knowledge is basically about, reproducing a toy example or a tutorial, and the experience of handling a system during production, or even shipping it to production, or even handling it post production is lacking. So this obviously, as you said, and as Sara mentioned, this is because of the Gen AI in general. This is makes the barrier to entry easy, but still, you want to go post production, you need an actual work experience.
Now let's turn the mic toward you both. You don't just talk about these trends, you've lived them. So could you each walk us through your career journey in this space? Dave.
You want me to start? Sure. Yeah. So as we mentioned at the start, I actually started my career right at the start of the dot-com bust. So I was in college and reading about all these, startups becoming, massive overnight, and all of it exploded before I graduated. So I entered the job market at kind of a weird time. I bounced around a little bit doing some work for telcos and some financial services before I landed at a Norwegian search engine company called Fast Search. And shortly after I joined Fast Search, they were acquired by Microsoft. And basically ever since then, I've been in this big tech realm. And so that was in 2007, I think. I don't remember if I started with them in 2006 or 2007, but I started with them, and then it's been basically search, NLP, conversational AI ever since then for basically most of my career at this point. So it was a really wild start, but then, I learned a lot of things at Microsoft. I could split my time there basically evenly between Steve Ballmer 5 years, Satya Nadella 5 years. So I got to see both halves of this roller coaster at Microsoft, and I learned an immense amount there about software at scale and just global businesses, how they were operating in general. And then, from here, I wanted to continue growing in the leadership and management direction. And so I kind of serendipitously took a role at Accenture. But that at this point, I had already moved to Germany. So I'm from California, but I lived a little while in Norway with Microsoft, and then into Germany. And then I switched to Accenture here in Germany, and where I met you, of course. And now, I'm 2-ish years into a engineering leadership role at Veeva Systems, which is a SaaS provider based in the US.
Yeah, so from my side, my career started as a software engineer, but even before that, I actually started coding very early on, as a game, so to say, with these blue screens, QBasic, Pascal. And I was this kid always fascinated by how things works, how I can build things. And I mean, since this podcast is mostly about entry level junior career seekers, in the beginning of my career as a software engineer, as a, so to say, junior software developer, I would say it was 2 years down the line, I noticed that, well, I'm not the best engineer in the room, and that was quite frustrating for me. I mean, that got me thinking that what really motivates the best software engineers doesn't motivate me the same way. And I get my energy. I slowly discovered that. Obviously, it took me time, but I slowly discovered that I get my energy from interaction and so on. And slowly I became this person to translate the requirement and speak with the management and so on. And obviously I was fascinated by the AI. And back in the days in Iran, you couldn't do much about it. And the funny thing is that I was also telling this story a couple of days back to some of our team members, that I was watching a TV series. It was called The Person of Interest. I don't know if you watched that or not.
No.
I highly recommend that. It's like 2011 or something like that, and they're building. There's this genius guy that they're building a machine that can predict crime, and this machine is just working with some high tech NLP technology. And then during this one specific episode, I got introduced to the topic of discourse analysis, and I started Googling it. I was like, okay, what is discourse analysis? I heard that from philosophy, but I didn't know, how does it really apply here? And then I ended up, more and more going to the topic of NLP in general. And then obviously, I applied to NLP to continue my studies, to do that abroad. And I ended up in Germany at University of Stuttgart, and I completed my master in natural language processing. It was 2015. It was beginning of introduction of deep learning techniques, and slowly those ontology-based techniques on understanding language are getting pushed away, and they're getting replaced by statistical natural language processing. They're making some promises. Libraries like Theano, Lasagna, and TensorFlow was just new. If I want to slice my career into two halves, the first half was product focus, and then I moved to consulting. And that then same in Accenture, we met each other, and I love both sides. I love product side, I love consulting side, because there are just really good things with both sides of them. And slowly I noticed that, okay, how can we bring the product thinking, the ownership that comes with product, into service and consulting? And that really inspired me to establish our own company and really go with potentially this solution-based approach by addressing various different problems that are happening within industries, various different industry verticals. And we have certain criteria to create a product for specific solutions, whether there is a high demand for it, or whether there is there is a commercial justification to that.
You had both great career paths, super interesting. So, I mean, if I would be a job seeker right now as a beginner, I would feel like, is it even possible to break an AI anymore with people like you with such great experience?
Is it possible to break into AI today? Absolutely. It's never been easier. I think there's so many tools, there's so many resources available to people today that I would encourage anybody that is interested in technology or product development, as you said, to jump into these things. If there's anything that AI as a whole promises to bring to society, it's that it's going to make it a lot easier for people to create things. And whether that's software or apps or other digital goods and services in the not too distant future, maybe making physical objects more and more common as well. But AI will make all of those things easier. And so if you have a passion for it and you want to do it, then yeah, pursue that. You can learn how to do it. All the tools are out there. You don't even have to buy high-end laptops anymore to get into computing. I remember when I was at the university, people thought the computer science kids were all very strange, that we all had these very expensive workstations in our dorm rooms, right? But you needed some of these tools to do a lot of this fundamental work, but you don't need these kind of tools anymore. The barriers to entry are just not that high.
Exactly. I completely agree. It's never been easier. In fact, we are in an era that, so to say, in my opinion, university degree is getting less and less relevant, and work experience and actual learning material that are available online are accessible, and they're more targeted toward specific tasks than what is being taught in university. And that's is totally doable. Whether right now, as we're speaking, is it easy to get a job in AI is a different topic, in my opinion. I would say competition is higher right now because of the various different factors, because of the layoffs, because of people are more available within the market. Maybe right now, as we are speaking, but there is this myth that it's difficult to get a job as a junior, because we read all these LinkedIn posts that there's no more junior left and so on. Well, that's a debatable topic, I would say. I think we are going to talk about that later on, but it has never been easier to break into AI. My general recommendation is that just hack it around. If you want to enter this field, you have to think like a hacker. You have to start by cracking up documentation of certain technology that you think and you hear it from some networking event or for your friends, whoever has recommended to you. Just try to reproduce a toy example. If you're a tutorial kind of person, start with a tutorial. But again, that's also what I tell to my team. Do not get stuck into tutorial black hole, because it's attractive. You learn quite a lot, but you never get real example of building things. You're not really solving something. So I would say use ChatGPT to come up with ideation to what can I build, and then get into a project. Try to actually solve something, and then you can easily break into the field of AI without any problem.
Roozbeh, that's really a great point. So do portfolios and GitHub matter more than degrees now?
I have a special opinion on this one, kind of a yes and no from my perspective. Do portfolios and GitHub matter more? I wouldn't say that the degree itself matters more than the skills, but the degree is still a good indicator for me as to whether or not a person has the foundational skills. So as you were saying before, if somebody's gone through the tutorial, that doesn't mean that they've used all the tools. So if I'm looking at a tutorial for something, I want to not just follow along. I want to check this into my code repository. I want to make it a part of our CI/CD service. I need to see that that's actually going to function as a part of my product, as a part of my infrastructure. And so if I see that somebody is learning these things, that's great. But I really care the most about whether or not they know how to get things done in a real live production environment. And that's never a part of the tutorial. I've done lots of them. It's never a part of the tutorial. There's a whole lot of examples of how to do something on your own laptop or in this online Jupyter notebook. But the things that I really need to see are that you know how to get things done in a production software development environment.
Yesterday, I read on LinkedIn that it's really easy to fit my CV to any job posting that is out there, because there is AI, obviously, and it can really perfectly match the description of the job. Does AI make it too easy right now at this moment?
It definitely makes it easy, but I mean, I appreciate that. I think it's good that people can tailor their CVs more easily. The risk is that you're going to tailor your CV. If you tailor your CV to a role, you risk that you represent yourself as a perfect fit when you're actually not. One of the things I tell people, because they always push back on this, I say that you should try to tune your CV towards the role that you're applying for. But this takes time. And people say, oh, but I might spend hours doing this. And I tell them, if you have to spend hours tailoring your CV to a role, you might step back and say, am I really a good fit for this role? If you have to make a lot of tailoring happen, it might mean that it's actually not a good fit for you. And AI definitely makes it a little too easy for you to maybe overlook whether or not you should be applying. So if I give the job description to an AI and say, this is my CV, rewrite it to fit to this. And I do see a lot of this lately, like people apply for roles and they seem to have a perfect CV for the type of role that I'm looking at. And a few years ago, I never would have considered like, well, did they really spend this much time making the CV perfect for the role? Now I'm starting to wonder, are they using a tool to make their CV appear super fitted? And again, as long as you have those skills, I don't mind. I don't care if you use the AI tool. I care if you show up for the interview and you actually don't sound anything like the person on the paper.
I have a similar view on that. In general, totally, I would say, a CV must be targeted toward the role, and the experience, the technology stack must be picked for that role, because you have to highlight it. Because I always tell, to a lot of candidates, and I see a lot of CVs that unless you have above 15 years of work experience, having more than one-page CV, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult in the pre-screening phase. So just try to, summarize and highlight key points in one page as much as you can. If you know a lot of technologies, just focus on the ones that matters for the role. There is another aspect that I believe in general, tailoring a CV or forging a CV for a specific role by just, prompting to ChatGPT that here's the job spec, forge my CV to fit to that. This is gonna, it's gonna give misaligned authenticity, in my opinion. And I believe hiring managers are really good at reading between the lines, figuring out that there is inconsistency in the story here. And I always say, authenticity cuts through. And even if you're missing certain things, there's no need to bother about it. I think that's also could be the response to the changes that happened recently. A lot of companies that they're getting a lot of applicants, they probably have some sort of automation in background to automatically screen the CVs that works on keyword base, and maybe there is some sort of LLM behind it to screen that, and people really want to pass that stage as much as possible. Or there is some non-technical HR employees screening the CV, and that person is trained to look for keywords. And that's why I'm really fan of that. If you're a hiring manager, you should do as much as possible when it comes to screening, and HR should, HR adds a lot of value. I'm not going to question that, but HR should be focused on, the people operation aspect, and screening the CVs itself must be, responsibility of the hiring manager. I'm sure, David, we spoke a couple of months back and you said you actually do that.
Yeah, I do. I read the cover letters. So if anybody's wondering, does anybody look at your cover letter? I look at your cover letter. That doesn't mean that it's always well aligned either, though, because that's another note. If you're going to write a cover letter, it should say something that's meaningful to me for the role that you're applying for, and not just be a general testament about, what a great employee you will be for any given job. So I will take the time to read it, but I will be disappointed if it doesn't feel like it was addressed to me and the type of role that you're applying for.
Perfect. That's great points that you guys mentioned. So basically both sides, HR and the job seeker, they should use less AI and more authenticity, right? Okay, perfect. Let's talk about job hopping. In a fast-moving industry like AI, people often change roles every year or two. Is that kind of career agility a smart way to grow, or can it backfire and become a red flag?
Well, I'm speaking from a different angle, most probably from the angle that Dave is going to speak. The company that Dave is working is a mature company. It's established. Probably they're looking at more stability, more talent that they want to invest, and that might be a red flag. I mean, I'm curious what you're going to say. But for me, to be honest, I would go a little bit deeper in that. I would say that if I receive a CV and I see that a person in the past 15 years spent their career in a safe zone, I would really question that. Do they have this entrepreneurial mindset to drive a change? Are they willing to take risk? So for me, necessarily is not a red flag. In fact, if I see quick jumps into career, I assume there is a story behind it, and I would like to talk to that person. I would like to understand that story a little bit more.
I think when it comes to job hopping, or as you said, career agility, maybe people are just being flexible and they're pursuing their passions. But I would definitely say it depends very much on the firm that you're talking to, the manager that is doing the hiring, and of course the goals of the people involved, and that's both the job seeker and the company that's doing the hiring. So if somebody's moving around very frequently, I might wonder, like, how committed are they to things? And to your point, like, if I'm hiring people today, yeah, I'm usually looking for people who are in for the mission. We have a goal. And if I don't think that people are in it for the mission, if I don't think they're in it for the goal, then they're maybe not a good fit for the team. So this is something that is definitely important for me. But I would also say, if I'm a job seeker and I'm building up this profile where I only stay at different roles for 6 months at a time. I mean, if I'm very early in my career and I'm trying to find my direction and my footing, this is one thing. But if I'm late in my career and it looks like I do a lot of short stays and then I do one longer one, and then I do a lot of short stays and then one longer one, anybody who might be looking at your CV, if they look at the fact that you've only spent 1 year or less at the last 3 companies and they don't care, I would also be wondering, if they don't ask me about this, is that because they only have a 12-month horizon? If I'm the person who's looking for jobs, I would hope that my employer of the future is also thinking about my career progression and my career growth, and that they have a long horizon as well. So if they have a short one for me, that's a bad indicator as well.
You've both developed strong intuition around hiring. How did you become good at spotting talent, not just credentials?
Well, by making a lot of mistakes.
Good answer.
Yes. Well, I always, if I want to make a geeky example of that, I refer to the typical computer science problem. It's called hiring problem, or the secretary problem. Hiring is difficult. And even, a classical computer science example, I guess in algorithm course or probability theory, you have this problem says that, well, you are supposed to hire a person, you are not allowed to go back, and you have to make a decision, and you have to potentially have a certain cutoff or stopping point. The hiring problem in computer science is not about finding a perfect candidate, it's about finding the optimum stopping point. So that's how hiring feels like at points. You never know if you interviewed 100 candidates, the number 101 is going to be better or not. So you have to limit the time horizon and so on. And what I learned over time was that you have to, as a hiring manager, you have to spec the job perfectly. You have to understand the job yourself. You have to understand what does success look like in this job. What do you actually really expect from the candidate in the first 3 months? I mean, I like the American model. You have this 30, 60, 90 plan. It's not something typical we do in Europe, but a candidate must present that plan, start of their career journey, and potentially work together to go for the growth in the role. And there are certain things that are very difficult to spot in an interview potentially, or even identify from a CV. So you have to take good amount of time with the candidates to interview them thoroughly. And still, I would say, there are certain characteristics that are difficult to identify. For example, I always say that, I always make this distinction between stars and divas. They both work hard. They really go above and beyond an extra mile, but over the time, divas ruin the organization. They demoralize the team, but stars, are the one who really drive alignment, drive the team forward. And this understanding of the attitude toward the team, the collaborative attitude, these are something really important that these are hard to identify in an interview, in a one-to-one interview, and they are going to slowly emerge during actually working together. If I want to summarize it, I would say spec the job as much as you can, and then you can minimize the risk of someone who is not perfect.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I don't think there's much else to add to that, actually. I mean, the key things are that, you're looking for some core traits. You're looking for characteristics that are not all technical. And a lot of it just has to do with work ethic and career progression. So also some of the things we were just talking about, right? If you show this history that you go places and you excel or you're growing, these are all good indicators that you're motivated and that you are ready to go into a space and learn and grow and have do something impactful.
So you don't just look at the experience itself, but you also look for authenticity and attitude in people, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When we talk about seniority, what really separates someone who's just competent from someone who's ready for promotion?
I think that's a topic that most founders and hiring managers really struggle with. Seniority, at the end of the day, as the word implies, it's semantically correlated with maturity. It's not about if you close more tickets. It's not about if you do faster work or if you are a great individual contributor. And in fact, in my opinion, there's misconception in industry or overall in the market about individual contributor. there is always leadership involved in the role. There is always leadership aspect involved in the seniority. For me, seniority means that if someone is moving from doing the work individually, doing the work that is assigned to them pretty much by themselves, to how much they do to enable the team, how much they think more about the team from now on. That doesn't have to be a people manager. That, for me, that means leadership. That means that you started from individual contribution and you are more focusing on force multiplier activities. And this is something that, in my opinion, becomes crucial into promotion aspect, into identifying if someone is senior, if someone is already entering the new level. Because at the end of the day, it's about team performance. It's about how effective team works and collaborate together. So that's, again, going back to the topic of stars and divas. The divas tend to, take the piece of work and not do that much of knowledge sharing, but, the piece that they are doing themselves for themselves, they're doing it perfectly. But then again, they're not enabling the team. And stars create alignment, move the team forward. And that is something I'm looking for. And when it comes to promotion, I think the signs have become obvious and you cannot unsee it. And it's already the person is operating to the next level. And if you don't do the promotion, you're just going to simply lose a star.
Yeah, well put. Well put. I think when I'm thinking about this, like you say, promotion or just seniority in general, and I don't want to mix the two up. That you might be having some other kind of career growth. You might be putting on new skills, learning new things. But ultimately, when you're thinking about seniority and this sort of professional development, it's really the same across a lot of different types of roles. I'm usually working with engineers. It's true, but I mean, this could apply to almost anything. As you become more and more senior, you tend to have more scope, more responsibilities. You're doing more leadership. I've also had this talk with individual contributors about, individual performance, the same kind of idea that, hey, you don't have to become a software manager if you, in order to move up. You'll put on leadership skills. You will be learning about coordinating work and breaking down tasks for other people. As you become a more and more senior engineer, you will do those things anyway. This isn't something that's reserved for the management class. This was one of the things that I took as a big learning while I was at Microsoft, that they were very, very keen on this story that, hey, you can be an individual contributor to an extremely high level, that they didn't try to push people into management roles for growth. I think you would agree this was probably very, very different from the consulting world, right?
Absolutely.
Where basically at Microsoft, it was like management optional. And I feel like at Accenture, it was management required.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it was something very, very different to say that like your career progression must go in this way of leading projects and leading people and this sort of thing. But in the technology side and the engineering side, they were much more aware of this, that you can grow and lead and develop and help develop others, but without actually becoming a people manager. And so this was a key thing to understand. And, this is also, as people are thinking about their own career progression, that they should be thinking about this also.
Exactly. In fact, I think GSI in general started adopting this model from Microsoft, but didn't really, land well within GSI because, as you rightly mentioned, this extreme individual contributor career track, which the end of it is, I believe it's called distinguished engineer, or before that staff engineer.
Yeah,
it doesn't make much sense in the domain of strategic consulting and typical service delivery for when you're working on client-facing roles.
So some people would like to go to the management route and some prefer to be an individual contributor. And speaking of individual contributor, what are your thoughts on freelancing?
Freelancing, especially in the past couple of years, we see in domain of data and AI is exploding. And, some part of that might be because of the layoffs. People are coming back to the market. They're not immediately finding a job. So some of them, they want to, quickly start with something and potentially, start having an income, and freelancing would be a reasonable route. But obviously what this has done to the market was that, there's more supply of the freelancers available. That's bringing the daily rates a bit lower because, the supply is higher than the demand. But whether if I recommend that path to someone exploring career in data and AI or not, well, I believe you need to have a very niche expertise to actually start freelancing, and you need to have certain level of seniority. But totally, I agree. It's actually exploding in the market.
Mm-hmm. And why are companies leaning so hard into freelance?
Well, the reasoning from the companies is pretty strategic. When you're navigating a fast-moving market of data and AI, technologies are emerging, and you need skill now, and you are only gonna get it from freelance roles available, and from startup perspective, or if you want to get a product out of the door, you need to react fast. And I believe that's bring cost into more variable side of the things, and potentially you're paying for certain commitments for the task to be accomplished, and you're not paying the social security aspect, the benefits, and so on. So and you cannot potentially wait for a 3 months to 6 month hiring cycle. So that makes sense from strategical angle for some companies.
Mm-hmm. Are you seeing the same, Dave?
I mean, I'm not really working in the freelance space, but I mean, I can say that, I mean, personally, I know that you can go to freelancing to build skills. Like you say, if you want to build a portfolio and say, oh, if somebody really paid me to do that, that's a fine place to go and find somebody who's willing to pay you for something. As for whether or not bigger companies are using more freelancers, I don't really know. I haven't really seen a lot of data about this, saying that there's more of it or less of it than there used to be. But if anything, I would say freelancing or the gig economy in general is clearly coming for like all kinds of roles. Everything where you could do it asynchronously. Where you can be kind of dropped into doing something quickly. And I mean, I've hired people very recently personally for for short-term freelance jobs, and I love the fact that there's people out there that are looking for all kinds of work, to do this or to do that, and whether it's software or it's surveying or something else completely different. I appreciate it, and I see a lot of people that are just like you say, trying to build their career, or they're trying to put together a portfolio that so that they can get a different type of job or break into a different type of industry.
And Dave, you once said companies can be too rigid about skills. They ask for things that are easy to teach and overlook what's hard to build. Can you unpack that for us?
Unpack this. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, skills that matter. I mean, at any given time, generally, if you're putting together a team for something, you're putting together a group of skills. It's you might think about this as, oh, I need to hire people that all know how to do a certain thing, but you're really looking for a set of skills that are needed to produce a certain thing. And so, if you think about the skills that are needed across a team, it might very much change what you're trying to hire for. And then you take this a little bit further and say, well, if I can't get one person that has 100% of the skills that I'm looking for, which things can I teach? What do I already have the ability to do well on my team? And if I already know how to do a certain thing well, then I can dial back the skills that I'm looking for to some other base skill set that's harder for me to teach. And what I can teach is going to be different for every team that I'm working with, right? So some teams will be able to bootstrap a software developer faster. Some will be able to bootstrap a product manager faster. Some of them will have deep dive knowledge with one type of model building process, but not with another one. So if I see a person and I know that I'm looking for somebody who has Google Cloud skills, but somebody is looking for a role and they have AWS skills, I'm quite confident that their understanding of machine learning will translate from one cloud provider to another. So as long as they're comfortable learning the new platform, that's not an obstacle for me. I wouldn't hold out for for the person who has exactly the right thing. I mean, if that person is there, great. We hire that person. But if they're not there, it's important to remember that part of these skills are things that maybe I don't have the ability to teach quickly, and I should not look for the unicorn in the hiring market. I know many years ago, I had one of these talks with a managing director, and I think you know this person as well. We won't name names, but I thought I was being a very mature manager and talking about how, yeah, when I'm hiring, I'm usually looking for people that only have 70-80% of the skill set that I think we need for a role, because it's basically impossible to hire for 100%. And he said, David, if you want to meet your hiring targets, you should probably think more like 50-60%. And I thought, what? You're kidding me. And then we had a brief discussion about, the onboarding process and the learning roadmap, and how it was more important that I knew what somebody was going to do to develop after they started. And it was less important to find the person that had even remotely close to the skill set. He was pushing me towards hiring for a really, really base skill set. And it made me think very hard about all future hires, about whether or not they really ticked off all those foundational boxes. And we talked about this earlier as well, right? That I said, I'm really wanting to know that people have these foundational skills, because these are usually the things where you don't want to teach them on the job. But if I'm focused on making a certain NLP powered product, then, I don't necessarily have to find a machine learning engineer who has experience making exactly that thing. But if they have exposure to NLP, or if they've used the same sort of model architectures to make other types of services, they will probably learn this very quickly. And if I find a person who has the right cultural fit, who says, hey, that's the motivated person, that's the driven person, this is the star, as you said, but they don't have all the boxes checked off, I'm much more willing to go past those things and say, hey, I don't need to have the whole kit in every one of the employees.
I have to say, very interesting viewpoint, and I can just echo what you just said. It's like, you touched on diversity of skills, and having understanding of various different platforms, and being able to translate into a different type of technology, which is probably different on the surface, but underneath is same thing. I can make an example of an orchestra or music. It's gonna be horrible to listen to an orchestra as just drum sets. You need diversity, and you need basically have these complementary skills within the team totally. And once those people potentially working within the team have understandings of the fundamentals of the music, you can potentially, they can drift, they can change, they can learn different topics. Other thing that you mentioned is that to having all the boxes checked and so on, and I can say I totally agree with you. The quality that I really look into people is coachability. How willing is that person to work with me to develop into someone who is that's gonna advance their skill, and potentially become the top notch in that area that they're working with. I believe it's very important, having that quality, having that open mindedness to work together, to being coached. And since we are basically mostly talking about the career entrance in domain of data and AI, I recommend to a lot of people that get a mentor. And it's also, it can come across in the wrong way, because I've seen in a misconception in the overall that, I have to go out there, I have to network, I have to find a mentor. Well, the way I put it is that you don't find a mentor, the mentor finds you. And that's your chance. Use that situation to the best you can.
Maybe there are some juniors listening right now, and they might not have foundational skills yet. And there's also this narrative going around that companies hire less juniors because AI can now do much of the junior work. Is that true, or what is your opinion on that?
It's temporary, in my opinion. Juniors did not go anywhere. And you might have seen, I don't know, some companies downsized and took a decision that they're going to hire less juniors for a quarter or two. It doesn't mean that, it's end of the world. Juniors, you totally need juniors within your team to build the future of the talent in your organization. That's very important. And I like to use the example of Klarna. They started basically laying off 10% of their staff, I guess, early 2023, and they started hiring back starting 2025. So I believe juniors didn't go anywhere, and basically it's just going to bounce back. Situation is going to be as before. Yes, it's true that generative AI and co-pilots and large language models are taking care of much of the groundwork, I would say. And in this situation, I emphasis on adaptability. If I'm someone I bet on the learners, and I bet on someone who is willing to learn, willing to adapt, and willing to utilize this technology to do a better job.
On my side, I mean, when I think about who's junior in the marketplace now, or just coming out of universities, for example, I don't envy them, because people are, like we mentioned earlier, it might be that people are pulling back on some of their hiring because they don't know, what they should be hiring for. They're not quite sure if they need all those people. But I mean, junior developers, people that are just coming into any kind of space, whether it's software or marketing or software or anything else, they're coming into these spaces, and that's the future senior people, of course. And the thing that's harder for me to get, to get a handle of is how you're going to do career progression for somebody that has a lot of these new tools at their fingertips. So, like you said, a junior person can now get started. We said it earlier, that with less things and less effort than ever before, you can make real things. You can be very productive. But what I really want to know is that you understand why a lot of those things are happening. That you understand why you chose this instead of that. It's not good if you just trust ChatGPT to tell you how to do something. Right?
Absolutely.
Anybody could do that. My kids could do that. If I just wanted somebody to follow the on-screen instructions, you could find anybody to do it. What I want to know is that you know how to tell the difference that between whether or not this is a working thing or a not working thing, that you recognize when the code editor is starting to produce bloat, that it's not really an efficient way to solve the problem, because then it's just waste. So I don't see them disappearing. I definitely think we need to, encourage people to come into the space, even if it's at a low level. But I also think that people that are coming into the workplace now need to be mindful of this, that they don't become dependent on these tools. They still have to learn the things that a senior engineer should learn. They still have to understand how to make those decisions and decide when to split things up. They still have to be able to think for themselves. And it might be very tempting here in the short run. I mean, all these tools are new, right? Nobody can say that, oh, I've been doing this for a long time. But, I watch my kids today using Copilot as a tutor, asking, how do I do this? Can you give me more examples of math problems like that? And, they can use these tools and they will grow up with this new understanding. But it's very important that they understand as well that that's a way for them to learn and grow, and not that it's a tool to just give them the answers.
So there's this myth that senior developers just write better code. But in reality, seniority is about working differently. How should expectations shift as someone levels up?
You get more senior and you start to take on more responsibilities. You start to understand the implications of your work in a broader context. And that's seniority. That's your growth. Now, if somebody is used to using a large language model to help them make decisions, that's fine, as long as you're still able to ask those questions, because the definition of that senior role or that senior producer, it's still going to be the same sort of thing. It's just that you're using different tools now. And I think this is the thing that's hard for people to wrap their heads around, because, yeah, we see that a person who really understands in depth how to use these things, they can use code helpers to work very, very quickly. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I want that very senior person to be supervising, this part of the work that's simple enough to be automated. I would still rather have somebody that is more junior looking at those parts or doing those jobs, because the more senior person is probably not focused on just writing the code. They are also thinking architecturally. They're also thinking about what are the breakpoints in this. They're also thinking about whether or not we might be exposing something to a cyber attack. They're thinking about bigger topics. They're interacting with broader audiences. And those are not jobs that, LLMs will do for them. So yeah, they can get more done, but I think I've seen this in a lot of studies actually, that if you're using chatbots or AI agents, that the people who get the most bump out of it are usually the most junior ones. Those are the ones that are spending the most time on these low-level tasks, and their work is the most accelerated when you're using these tools. And then you go into the senior category and they're like, oh, this didn't help the senior engineer very much at all. He only got a 10% boost, or she got a small performance benefit from having used this model. I don't think this is because they were writing so much better code than the junior person. I think it's because they're not doing as much of the code writing as the junior person, and that's why they don't get the same bump out of it. So it's easy to look at some broad statistics and maybe take away some messages that don't make as much sense when you're on the ground and you're watching it happen. But I do think very much about, how do I help people develop? How do I help people, and not develop software, but how do I help people to grow and improve their skills in this age of AI first, where they get started with these tools and they can do this from the beginning?
Totally agree with that. I mean, the distinction that I always make to the team is that coding is very different than engineering and software. You could produce code snippets, and essentially AI is better than you at that, way faster. I think recently there was a competition. There was only one human who got extremely exhausted, who could beat the AI system for OpenAI, I believe. And engineering a software is not just about writing code snippets. It's about architecture design. It's about system design. It's about security aspect of it, failover, disaster recovery. Specifically about that performance boost that you talked about, I can totally resonate with that. I know people who are not programmer or who are not from programming background, and they get totally better performance boost and productivity when they use tools, for example, like Cursor. I thought that this could be because of the way they prompt the system, because what they want, they just describe the behavior of it.
Mm-hmm.
Say that, well, I need a iOS application view that look like this and that, and I need a button here with this color and so on. But a programmer, a very senior programmer, would go into detail and describing, and it's like micromanaging the Copilot.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. So we talked about it before. So Gen AI raises the bar for productivity, but also shifts the skills landscape. And maybe you can summarize what you said before. Like, what are the hard and soft skills that actually make someone future-proof?
I would potentially emphasis on soft skills. I mean, they're not really soft at the end of the day. I mean, we call them soft skill, but some of them are deep into our behavior, and they are very hard to master. Things like, for example, attitude in general, coachability that I mentioned earlier, they don't have expiration date. Technology has expiration date. If you learn certain technology, you have to move on, you have to unlearn and relearn. But if you work on your communication skills, if you work on your presentation skills, your collaboration with the team, your enabling of others, unblocking the team, they don't have an expiration date. And I love this notion of, work backward and skill forward. I believe it's coming from Jeff Bezos. And that's something, you learn a lot when you work in consulting, because it's client facing, because the idea is that we are customer obsessed. So we are going to keep customer happy, and we are going to learn the innovative ways to deliver. And constant reskilling is part of the job. So this would be my the final notes on this.
I'll lean the other way. I'll say I think to be a very if I'm new in the marketplace, or if I'm mid-career, I think things that I would really want to be able to demonstrate are that I have a very strong technical foundation. Soft skills, absolutely important. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. As you become more and more senior, these become more and more important as well. But earlier in your career, you have to nail the basics. And when I'm talking to people and I'm learning about like who's a good engineer, I want to hear that you really have a solid understanding of the programming language that you work in, for example, that you that you understand common patterns, that you understand the workflow that you're in from end to end. And I've seen a lot of, in my career, I've seen a lot of different places and a lot of different workspaces, and I've worked at companies where they seem to want you to know very little about how the business worked. And I've worked at other places where they wanted you to know everything about how the business worked. But the reality is you're the most productive when you understand what are the inputs and the outputs for your role and for your organization, for the area that you're in. And if you focus on these things and nailing the core skills for getting your work, into a product, for example. We talked earlier a little bit about processes and tools. I said early on, you need to focus on these things. I really believe this, that, you need to be able to jump in and say, I know how these tools work and I can describe them for you in detail. Because especially if you're a junior person coming into the workplace, this is going to be the single largest obstacle for you being productive. And so the sooner you can show a hiring manager or a potential employer that you know how to do those things and that you can be trusted to jump right in and start producing, this is the thing, this is the skill that people are always going to be looking for first. And if we don't think that you can do those things, then you won't proceed in an interview loop.
So we can say that both is important.
Both things are important.
Completely agree.
To summarize, it's all important.
It's all important. Absolutely. Cool. Let's close with the leadership angle. What actually keeps rising stars from walking away? What systems or cultures help retain top talent?
I will actually start with something that was in the news fairly recently, because Meta has been poaching people for enormous amounts of money from big companies. And I think, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong here, was it Sam Altman that was talking about how he thought they would fail because they were building a team of mercenaries?
Yes,
and
it was something.
Yeah. And if everybody knows their important, software development reading list, everybody has Inspired on this book, where they talk about how you should try to build a team of missionaries and not a team of mercenaries. And of course, when we say this, building a team of missionary versus mercenary, we mean people that are in it for the mission. And of course, if you're just hurling money at people and that's the only reason they're coming to work for you, then you've built a team of mercenaries, and they won't hesitate to leave if they become disgruntled about something. So I think this is a big part of the retention story as well, though. Obviously, everybody's looking for some kind of balance, right? That you have your personal purpose that you're after, the thing that you want to support, or the mission. There might be something about security or work security, job security. Maybe you're thinking about your family and how you're going to pay the bills. There's a little bit about, the money overall, what is your actual pay going to be like? And some people are also motivated by things like status. And if you look at both what the employer is looking for, what somebody says they need from you, and maybe they want to hire a star. Maybe that's one of their criteria. Maybe they're looking for a big personality. Maybe they're even looking for a diva. Maybe they want that personality, right? But they might be looking for a lot of different things, and you might be looking for a lot of different things. But there's always this balance between the two. And so we have to say, if I'm getting the things that I need for my purpose, my security, my income, my status, if the right boxes are being ticked for me and the right boxes are being ticked for the employer, then you're probably in balance and things are probably okay. But your stars leave, or other people leave in general, when the scales start to go out of balance, when it starts to look like it's one way, like the employer is getting all the benefit or the employee is getting all of the benefit. Then things turn into trouble, right? This is when you start getting bad performance reviews, or when you're grumpy all the time because you think that you're not being recognized enough at work. But this is not just about a person or a task. It's also a part about your team and your management and the culture of the company you're at. But it's always this, both parties should be getting as much as they're giving, in a reasonable space. And obviously, if somebody shows up and says, hey, I'm going to give you a giant title and everything else is going to stay the same. If you're motivated by status, you'll probably take that. But if you're motivated by mission, you probably won't. And this is why I like to home in on mission when I think about what's the most important thing for retaining, for keeping people. That I want to know that I'm working with people that are motivated by the same things that I am and ultimately by my employer. And as long as we're all on the same mission, then we're in a pretty good space. And if somebody starts to go away from the mission, if they decided that there's something else that they've prioritized more than the mission, then they should probably go.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think we all need to accept the fact that people eventually will fly away, and it's not going to be a retention for a decade or two, and especially I would target this a little bit toward the newer generation, Gen Z specifically. Uh, I like how you mentioned the team of mercenaries versus team of missionaries, and clearly I agree that the mission itself need to be clearly communicated to the team. They need to align on that. We have to have a shared understanding of this. And I will go a little bit back earlier in the conversation. We mentioned that the landscape, the culture of corporate has changed in the past 2 decades. It's not about unquestioned loyalty to a specific company anymore. People are not afraid to walk away. It's about having a fair exchange, and the demand of the employee must be clearly understood, and the mission need to be clearly communicated. And potentially this would lead the organization will advance forward from the talent itself, and talent also will develop and achieve the goals that they want.
And I also think it keeps changing, right? Like maybe I start a job and I'm completely driven by the job title I'm getting, or I'm driven by the money I'm getting. But then, like Dave, you mentioned also, maybe I get family later. I have different goals. So it keeps changing. So I think it's a constant conversation with your manager as well. Like it should be both sided, like you mentioned, right?
I describe this for a lot of people, especially new managers or new people managers, I should say, that you can kind of picture a simple Venn diagram of somebody's priorities. And as long as you and the team members are in the mostly overlapping in these priorities, then things will be okay. But if you manage a team of people for long enough, somebody in your team will leave that circle. Somebody's priorities will move away from the core of the team. And it's better to recognize this early and manage it so that you can have an amicable split than for them to just keep drifting off and for performance to drop off. And what I described earlier, that somebody is constantly unhappy, whether it's the employee or the employer, but you don't want it to turn into an ugly situation. And it's totally natural that some people's priorities will shift over time. And like I say, if you've had a team long enough, then you will have people whose priorities shift away from yours, where their mission changes.
Great. Thank you so much.